On the outbreak of war, the day war broke out, a policeman came to the boarding house we were still at and asked us to come down to police headquarters, which is at Calverley Street where the library is now, and to bring our documents and to bring our cameras, any cameras, binoculars, maps. That's about it, I think. And our documents were stamped enemy alien, and we had to leave our cameras, binoculars, any maps. We didn't have any maps. That was that. Then the government instituted tribunals, which interviewed every alien in the country and classified them into three categories. Category A were enemy aliens who were interned immediately. They were mostly German citizens who had left behind, who were potential spies. Category B were still enemy aliens, but were not interned at the beginning of war. And Category C were called friendly aliens. In Leeds, for some reason or other, possibly the anti-Semitic judge, everybody, all the Jewish refugees, were made Category B enemy aliens. This was not so in the rest of the country. In London, for instance, most people were made friendly aliens. So came the German invasion of Belgium and Holland, May 1940, with the threat of invasion here, and the government decided to first of all to intern all Category B enemy aliens. There had been a protest about the Leeds results in Parliament, and in March the government agreed to have a second tribunal in Leeds to review all the cases. They started sitting, I think, beginning of April. They saw people in alphabetical order, and most of them whom they'd seen were made friendly aliens. My name starting with S. They got as far as G when the internment came. To start with, there was considerable resentment. You know, we felt badly done to, because obviously, as I said, we were had far more reason to be opposed to Nazis than most British people were, and then to be treated as if we were Nazis. You know, in Germany we were kicked out because we were Jews. Here we were interned because we were Germans, which we were no longer because they cancelled our citizenships. So there was a certain amount of resentment, but also understandable, because you must remember the situation in 1940, invasion of the lowlands, invasion of France, Dunkirk and all that happening. There was panic in this country, I mean, clearly, you know, and this was a panic reaction, I think. Churchill's famous words, you know, they're quoted everywhere, when they put to him, what shall we do with the enemy, with the friendly aliens, enemy aliens? And Churchill said, collar the lot. Well, you know, those were his words. So there was some resentment, but eventually you realized, I mean, it was a panic reaction. On the 16th of May, 1940, the foreman came to me at work and said, "You wanted in the office." Well, I'd never been in the office before. And I turned around and he says, "You better take your coat." When I got to the office, there were two detectives there, and says, "We've come to intern you." They took me home, pack a case, and then took me to Leeds Town Hall, where my father was already there, and I think my brother also came. He was arrested at work. And when there was a coachload full, they took us to Pontefract Barracks as the first sort of internment camp. We were there, what was probably the drill hall, straw on the floor, no mattresses or anything. And we were there for, of course, nobody had prepared for this. We were there for about a fortnight or thereabouts. We were then taken by train to Huyton near Liverpool, where people were collected from all over the country in an almost completed new housing estate, council housing estate, which was built but not furnished or finished off. The houses were there, but nothing else. And we were there. That was made into a sort of temporary internment camp. After a while there, we were then marched, I think, to Liverpool docks, put on a ferry to the Isle of Man. Now, on the Isle of Man had been an internment camp in the First World War, and they more or less repeated the thing in the Second World War. A row of terraced boarding houses in the seafront in Douglas was confiscated, if that's the word. The landladies had to move out the furniture, everything except beds, and the block was encircled by a double fence of barbed wire, and that was Camp Central Promenade Internment Camp, Douglas, Isle of Man. There were several others on the Isle of Man in different places. We were there, we were interned, but we were more or less inside the camp, left to our own devices. And then the British government decided that they couldn't cope with all the prisoners of war as well as internees, and they tried to push them off into what was then dominions and colonies. They asked Australia, Canada and South Africa to take prisoners on internees. And South Africa refused outright. Australia and Canada agreed. So one day, mostly all single internees, between 60 and 60, were shipped back to the mainland, to Liverpool, and put on a big ship, a converted troop ship called the SS Ettrick. We were delayed because a similar ship 24 hours earlier, the Arandora Star, had been torpedoed at the north end of the Irish Sea, where it goes into the Atlantic. And so there was a bit of a hold-up. We were then escorted by a destroyer or a frigate, I don't know the difference, as far as the Atlantic. And we were off. We were not told where we were going. We had no idea what was happening. But once we were out in the Atlantic, we realized we were heading west. We realized it would be Canada. The conditions on board were appalling. There were no bunks or anything. There were a few hammocks. The rest, we were all below deck, locked down during the night. So if we'd had been torpedoed during the night, nobody would have got out. During the day, we were allowed up on deck. Everybody was seasick, completely seasick. We arrived in Canada 5, 6, 7 days later, whatever long it took, to be received by French-Canadian troops. We were then stationed at a camp on the heights of Abram in Quebec City. Very beautiful view, fantastic view, River Lawrence River. But that's the only thing that was beautiful, was the view. But the treatment on the whole wasn't bad. Again, there were protests in Parliament about our treatment. I mean, after all, we were far more opposed to Nazis than most of the British were. And the government decided to send an emissary to Canada to interview people individually and to decide what to do with us, whether we could come back with a view to release or not. And this guy called Alexander Patterson came. He was a prison commissioner, and he was sent to Canada, and he came to the camp. That was after a year or so, not before. And being in the camp office, I sort of acted as his receptionist or secretary, whatever, and did his appointments. He made a very good immediate impression on us, which sort of saved my view of Britain. And he interviewed everybody and made decisions, and so as a result of which we, both Frank and I, came back to England. We had to wait for transport, of course. Transport was very scarce. There were convoys, U-boats, and supplies for the British Armed Forces from America and from everywhere else. So shipping space was scarce. So it was quite a few months before we actually did come back. But come back we did, and back to the Isle of Man, pending our case being considered. And after about 3 months in the Isle of Man, I was released first, and Frank came about 3 weeks later, and we came back to Leeds. I came back in August 1942.